In the manufacturing industry, there is a warning that one strategic mistake cannot be covered even by implementing 10,000 countermeasures. But strategy setting is essential for the development of a company. Strategies are determined by the operations of the top management. Therefore, we have traced and organized various historical developments and how to take the right strategy, including targets other than industry. When we look into history, whether it be a company or a country, we find a natural law that says, no matter how good a reform method you have, unless a leader with a trustworthy strategy appears, there will be no opportunity to materialize the effective measures needed at that time. There is an example in Chinese history that illustrates this principle. It is the example of Mr. Taikobo. He had many plans to develop his country, but there is a famous anecdote about how he would go fishing until a lord with a good strategy appeared and contacted him, even at an advanced age. The details of this story can be found in the book, but this anecdote clearly shows the relationship between strategy and tactics, and at the same time, we can see that the one who handles strategy is the lord who determines the prosperity of the country. JAL, known in Japan as a huge company in the aviation industry, was in the red and the impact on the country was huge. At a time like this, the Japanese government asked the Japan Revitalization Corporation to draw up a revitalization plan like this. However, if the top of JAL did not have the power to execute this strategy, it would end up being pie in the sky. At that time, the late Mr. Inamori, the founding president of Kyocera and a leader of many companies, was suddenly asked by the government to take on the role of president and work on the revival. The key to the revival was a unified effort by all employees. The structure that Inamori used to revive JAL was as shown in this diagram. Starting from the left of the diagram, the top person in charge of each job, Mr. Inamori, correctly understood the philosophy presented by Mr. Inamori, and acted together with his subordinates to realize the activities. Mr. Inamori spoke honestly, and explained why. It was an activity to realize what for what in each workplace. The measures shown in the center of the diagram are the philosophy necessary for JAL's revival that determines the actions, and by knowing the success or failure of this type of activity in a timely manner, it was a visualization measure that allows everyone to immediately understand the results of the efforts of each department and each person. As a result of implementing this structure, JAL was revived in 1 year, and after the revival, Mr. Inamori replaced the president with the next generation, but the company is still continuing to perform well. At the end of the 1980s, Japanese industry was internationally recognized as Japan as number one, and small group activities were actively implemented in each company. However, at that time, each company was still full of waste, and this method was merely a response of, if we educate problem-conscious on-site personnel on improvement methods and hold free discussions, the effect of eliminating waste will be achieved and corporate profits will increase. Everyone knew that this method, which had no strategy in terms of management, would eventually come to an end. In response to the need for industrialization to set corporate strategies as a solution to this problem, JMA gathered experts who had led Japanese industry and began to study the issue. However, despite 3 years of enthusiastic discussions, the discussions ended without reaching a conclusion. So, a project team was formed to investigate companies that had been used as models around the world, regardless of their size, and the composition of this diagram was obtained. As a result of the previous survey, the world's leading companies, first, they clearly and specifically set corporate goals for sustainable development. Second, they analyzed the current situation in detail. Third, they concretely set intermediate goals in stages to achieve the set goals, while at the same time making visible the content that can definitely achieve future goals, and are proceeding with concrete activities. Therefore, the project team showed this diagram to complement the content. The requirements for corporate strategy are based on three pillars: product strategy, manufacturing strategy, and management and financial strategy, and the activities to climb up and realize them are organized into a net-like form. The corporate activities shown there take the shape of a tree, and these activities show results such as increased sales and profits, but various improvement methods were treated as fertilizer. At the end of the 1990s, the Total Productivity Management Group at JMA implemented the above-mentioned content and started a project to conduct research with companies, awarding TP prizes to manufacturing companies that had achieved solid results. Mr. Nakamura participated in this project as one of the judges for over 10 years. Through this process, he summarized each company's strategy in this diagram. This diagram has already been introduced in the form of this book and has been used by many companies. When we surveyed the world's leading blue-chip companies earlier, the first measure was to set an ideal goal of continuous growth. To make a concrete decision, a map is needed. Even today, companies without such a map will introduce a certain methodology with excellent results in a certain situation, and there are cases where they adopt it as if it were a fad, but they do not achieve results, or even take the company in the wrong direction. In the industrial world, this is said to be similar to the phenomenon of a ship without a map wandering on the ocean. This figure is a production technology map for the industrial world. For more details, please refer to the book, but this map is for companies to set ideal goals and realize them as soon as possible. First, they list items for making management indicators such as quality, cost, and delivery time first class, and compare them with top-class companies, in other words, international evaluations including other industries. This is a numerical target. In order to achieve such numerical targets, it is necessary to realize a state of IT utilization from various production technologies and production management. Therefore, here too, we compare with top-class companies around the world, including other industries, for example, JITness and the degree of automation, to grasp the current level and set goals to improve. The improvement of this state target becomes a numerical target, but in order to do so, it is necessary to decide on a person in charge and develop human resources to improve skills. Here too, there is an optimal level, so the way to use this map is to clearly state the content and structure it to concretely work toward it. The factors that companies should refer to when developing strategies are not limited to companies. The book also introduces examples like the one in the figure, but I would like to introduce two examples that companies have particularly emphasized and used as references. When the late Kennedy became the President of the United States was in a recession and the international situation was also full of problems. At that time, a press conference was held for Japanese newspaper reporters who asked about the U.S. strategy. The president responded, "I have researched the whole world, and the person and approach I want to emulate is Yasuji Yosen's reforms of the Yonezawa domain." However, none of the reporters knew about this situation at the time, but after returning to Japan and researching, they learned for the first time about his greatness. In this book, Mr. Yasuji Yosen was appointed as the Lord of the Yonezawa domain at the age of 17, a role similar to that of a hired president of a company. He gathered all his wisdom and, together with key people, formulated a plan to get the domain out of the red. This required him to push back against resistance and to follow the established strategy, but the results of this series of activities were extremely innovative and wonderful for the people living in the Yonezawa domain. Mr. Genghis Khan, a small ethnic group in Mongolia in the 12th century, fought against other nations one after another and created a huge nation that occupied the Eurasian continent in just one generation. In a sense, this situation is similar to the way a venture company suddenly evolves into a huge corporation. The reasons why Mr. Genghis Khan was able to govern such an incredibly large area during this period are summarized in the diagram below. In order to govern such a large area as the Eurasian continent for many years, the number of people who fought in Mongolia alone was not enough. Therefore, as shown in the fourth column at the bottom of the diagram, he strengthened the organization and asked capable people from the countries that he had lost to support his strategy and proceeded with measures to govern the country. Genghis Khan divided his country into 4 countries as shown in the diagram above, and established a system in which his sons would rule after his death. However, as everyone knows, the country subsequently declined. There are many examples of companies where large organizations decline in a similar way, but we can learn from history the necessity of developing new strategies for development and nurturing the human resources, who will carry them out. This book has outlined many examples and historical initiatives regarding strategy, and I have only introduced a portion of them here so far. Thank you very much for watching the introduction to this Kindle book. The above explanation is the gist of this picture book. You can also get it at this URL. Amazon Prime members can watch it for free.